The old man orders a girl in perverse manner, then sucks his fingers obsessively. Selina dares not speak out, for she is this nouveau riche's slave. In that turbulent and impoverished era, the disabled old man Jean made his fortune through alchemy. He bought gold jewelry from the villagers at low prices and smelted it, extracting huge profits from it. However, he was ruthless and became a local tyrant. Besides making money, Jean had another hobby: abusing and toying with young girls. Villagers often sent their daughters to Jean to exchange for money, hoping to please him. No one knows exactly what the girls suffered, because every girl who came out there became mentally unstable. But money makes the world go round, and there were always girls in Jin's mansion. Selina's father was no good either. He indulged in gambling, prostitution, and drugs. His job was to squander the family fortune, and his hobby was domestic violence against his wife. After years of torment, Selina's mother finally chose to commit suicide. Now burdened with enormous gambling debts, he set his sights on Selina. He gripped her arm tightly, ignoring her cries and struggles, intending to use her to exchange for money from old Jean. Passing a tea house, he boasted to the villagers about his soon-to-be rich life. The villagers, used to this, didn't offer Selina any help. At old Jin's house, the father and daughter encountered a mother and daughter emerging from house. The girl was dazed and unresponsive. Keep in mind, she had only been in the courtyard for a few days. Selina was terrified, her legs going weak, pleaded with her father to reconsider, but he held her arm tightly and led her into the small building. Old Jean looked Selina up and down, a flicker of interest in his eyes, then approached, smelling and touching her. Selina's father continued to promote her, saying Selina was fair-skinned and beautiful, without a single scar, and most importantly, young and healthy, enough to keep old Jean entertained for a long time. So old Jean asked Selina how old she was. She trembled like a leaf, unable to utter a word. Unexpectedly, old Jean grabbed her hair, first pressing his nose against her skin to inhale her youthful scent, then disgustingly licking her face. Old Jean warned her to always be respectful and answer every question he asked. Old Jean was satisfied and offered an unprecedentedly high price. Having just gotten rid of Selina's father, he couldn't wait to enjoy his pleasure. Old Jean sat opposite Selina, leaning on his cane, and told her to take off her clothes. Selina, crying and trembling, complied. Old Jin's eyes widened. Selina washed herself while crying. The soap she once couldn't afford now only disgusted her. Old Jean was thrilled. That day, Selina experienced a nightmarish experience. Her screams echoed throughout the small bamboo house. Meanwhile, her father was using the money from selling his daughter to treat his friends to drinks and revelry. The landlady couldn't stand it and said, "How could you treat your daughter like that?" He claimed he had raised Selina for 18 years, and she should repay him with everything. At midnight, after old Kim fell asleep, Selina dressed and escaped the small building. Old Kim's blind son heard the commotion but didn't react, because every girl sent there tried to escape. Old Kim didn't care when he discovered this, because they had been betrayed by their families and had nowhere to go. Selina ran home frantically. Her father was fast asleep. Selina cried and woke her father, clinging to his leg and pleading, but he was unmoved, urging her to go back. She was now old Kim's possession. Selina was driven from her home. Like all the girls before her, she could only return to that dark, gloomy little building. Selina took out a straw mat, spread it on the ground, and silently lay down to sleep, but she was unwilling to accept her fate and resolved to change it with her own strength. The landlord's female slave was bathing upstairs, completely unaware that a blind male servant was downstairs, intoxicated by the bathwater. He had fallen in love with Selina from the very first day she arrived, but Doman knew he had no chance. He could only listen to the commotion upstairs while the landlord abused Selina, his desire burning within him. Unexpectedly, Selina approached him and spoke to him gently. In the goddess's soft words, Doman revealed his true identity. He was nominally the adopted son of the landlord, old Jean, but in reality, he was merely his slave. Despite being blind, he was forced to serve old Jin's every need, denied even the right to eat at the table. Any slight misstep would result in severe beatings from old Jean. Doman had tried to escape, but was caught and brought back. He not only suffered further abuse, but the ruthless old Jean also used a branding iron to burn his eyes out. From then on, Doman became completely numb, merely eking out a living. He watched the girls being abused by old Jean without a shred of sympathy or emotion, for he was already in dire straits himself. But Selina didn't blame him for his coldness. Instead, she embraced him with pity. They felt a sense of shared suffering, for they shared a common enemy, Old Jean. The next day at breakfast, Selena even offered to let Doman sit at the table. After Old Jean stopped her, she personally served him food, deeply moving him. His goddess-like image grew even stronger. Winning over Doman was a first step in Selena's plan. The second step was to lull Old Jean into a false sense of security. For this, Selena needed to endure immensely. Old Jean didn't change his ways at the table. He stretched his foot between Selena's legs, ordering her to move closer to the table. Selena obeyed, clenching her teeth and suppressing her tears. Selena moved into Old Jin's house, spending her time helping with chores with Doman and enduring his abuse. Because of Selena's submissive and obedient nature, Old Jin's attitude softened somewhat. He even started talking to her about life. Selena pressed her advantage, actively trying to seduce him. A rare hint of guilt flashed across Old Jin's face. Movie sound effect. Selena saw through his stubbornness, gave a wicked smile, and moved closer. The two quickly became entangled, while Doman, with his excellent hearing, could only strain to resist, his hatred for Old Jean deepening. Selena's tenderness slowly changed Old Jean, because she was the first girl who wasn't afraid of him, hadn't been driven insane by his brutality, and was even willing to be close to him. So, the usually stingy man actually opened his secret stash in front of Selena, selected an expensive necklace, and personally put it on her. Selena outwardly appeared to be in love, but secretly memorized the location of the key and the stash. For the first time, Lao Jin took her out, bought her new clothes, and carried bags full of them. Lao Jin's love-struck symptoms were so obvious that even the villagers noticed. Feeling sweet inside, Lao Jin couldn't resist touching Selena's delicate hand. That night, after Lao Jin fell asleep, Selena took out the box containing valuables, but only took a necklace. She then went downstairs to rekindle her relationship with Doman. The next day, she went out to do laundry as if nothing had happened. The girl, sent by her family to a wealthy landowner as a slave, suffered inhuman torture and became mentally unstable. She was unresponsive to her surroundings and often trapped in painful memories. Selena found her and tried to comfort her, but the girl was like a frightened bird, struggling before calming down in Selena's arms. As soon as her mother arrived, she immediately nestled against her. Selena had witnessed the previous girl's tragic fate, which made her even more aware. Even though Lao Jin was now affectionate towards her, he was still essentially a vicious and cruel bastard. Selena entered a small building and caught Old Jin beating Doman. He had already noticed the necklace was missing and naturally assumed Doman had stolen it, without suspecting Selena at all. This was all within her expectations. She calmly took out machete. This caught Old Jin off guard. He cowardly pressed Selena's hand down and turned to leave. Selena, however, still pointed the machete at Doman, angrily cursing him for daring to steal when he was blind. In Old Jin's eyes, she stood up for him and loved him dearly. In Doman's eyes, she pretended to be a bad guy to avoid being beaten and loved him dearly. Selena's little scheme got her the necklace and solidified their trust, a triple win. Finally, Selena got her chance to escape. That day, Old Jin was going to a party, and Selena said she wanted to stay home and rest. Old Jin, thinking he had won her heart, agreed without much thought. Selena smiled on the outside, but in her heart, she had stabbed him 1,000 times. After Old Jin left, Selena immediately began packing her things. Although they were no longer afraid of Doman betraying them, they could only leave late at night to avoid being seen by others. Old Jin was completely drunk and could barely stand. Selena's father volunteered to take him home. On the way, the intoxicated Old Jin fell to ground and boasted that he had stolen his daughter. Little did anyone know, it turned out that Old Jin had been attracted to Selena's mother's beauty years ago, first by enticement, then by coercion, and finally by force. Old Jin was stunned. Before he could react, the man snatched his crutch, threw it aside, and kicked his injured leg hard. Then he laughed wildly and left, leaving Old Jin struggling to pick up his crutch, limping home in utter shock. Meanwhile, Doman seemed to realize he was just a fish in the goddess's trap and refused to leave, insisting on discussing his physiological research with her again. Selena, fearing he would betray her, had no choice but to agree. As the two were engrossed in their investigation, Old Jin returned. Before he could even process the fact that the house he'd stolen was actually his own, he discovered he'd been robbed again. Enraged, he was about to kill someone, a cripple and a blind man, locked in a fierce struggle, when Selena decisively grabbed a knife and killed Old Jin with a single blow. Old Jin's face was filled with sorrow and disbelief, while Selena revealed a long-suppressed hatred. In his dying moments, Old Jean tried to touch Selena's face, but ultimately collapsed to the ground. Selena burned down the sinful building, then divided old Jin's assets equally, intending to part ways with Doman. Doman, of course, refused. He only wanted to be with Selena, and being a coward, he couldn't muster any backbone even with money. Selena didn't care about any of that. She didn't covet a penny of Doman's money and didn't want any further involvement with him. Selena resolutely walked towards her own future. Blind Doman tried to follow her, but ended up going the opposite direction. Okay, that's all for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to like and subscribe.